It is my pleasure to moderate this panel of my colleagues as female presidents, and I'll open it up with a few remarks. So the first comment I have to the group this morning as I look around at my fellow women is, you look great. You look beautiful this morning. And I know that they didn't happen by accident. You thought about what you were going to wear. You thought about your look, especially, you're going to be with other women and they're checking it out up and down. And again, you want to look your best. You want to look good. You didn't get to the look that you have today, the style, as Dr. Fitzsimmons talked about. You didn't get there by accident. There was actually a process that you went through, that you're going through, that you continue to go through. But there's a process. There's an intentional process that you go through to establish your look. It's not a uniform. It's not something that's mandated. Hopefully, it's authentic. Your look, your style is you, the demonstration of you to your colleagues and the world. So what can we learn about that if we reflect on our style, our fashion style, and how we got there? So there are lessons there. One is that what looks good on someone else doesn't necessarily look good on you. And you learn that through the years. You've also learned that you need a trusted friend, you need that buddy to give you the truth and say, that suit with those shoulder pads is got to go. I know it's your favorite. Baby. That's great. You can still wear it. You got to update that. You got to update that look. And the other lesson that we learned is that when you have it together, when you have that look together, you know it. You know it. You've got the go-to outfit. You know it's the outfit that you feel good in. You know it's the look that you're comfortable in. It's the skin that you're comfortable in. But you also know, again, that it's appropriate and it demonstrates something about you that you want other people to know, or that at least gives you that confidence and that good feel. Leadership development, especially for women, can follow that same process, should follow that same process. It should be that intentional. It should be something that you work at, that you think about, that you look at other leaders and say, does that fit me? Does that work for me? You have a trusted friend. Again, as Dr. Fitzsimmons talked about, you have someone that you can go to and say, is this working? Is this not working? Tell me what is working for you and what is not working in the way that I want to go. You want to develop your own style. There's books and books on leadership. There's every magazine in the grocery store on fashion. You have to develop your own style. And it takes experimentation. You have to try different things, you have to see what works. There's nothing wrong with finding something that doesn't work. That's a lesson learned. That's a valuable lesson learned. I learned early on that I am terrible at hiring people. Terrible. I love to hire the person that's quirky and creative and squirrely at times. And I once had a colleague come up and say, you love those people. You're not working every day with that person that you hired with the red glasses and the. So I learned early on that I need a team around me to make hiring decisions, and I need their input early on and often. And so I get credit for very good hiring decisions, and I have made excellent decisions because I don't make them on my own. That is one thing, again, that I have learned. And then finally, again, just like a good just like a good outfit. You want to play up your strengths. You want it, so you need to know what they are. You need to be honest. Women, again, you know, we're great at finding what we're weak at, but you need to play up your strengths. You need to know what it is about you that is positive and very strong, and then just be at peace with what isn't. Again, you know, not all of us can, you know, look like a fashion model, and we are at peace with that, and we know, again, what is our strength and what is our weakness. So as we go into the talks about leadership and authentic leadership, just think about that, be intentional. Again, design your own look, make sure you find a trusted friend, and play up your strengths and be at peace with yourself. So with that, then I will have the panelists, and we'll start over here with Betty Young from Hocking. They will introduce themselves, and they are going to mention what it is about their value and character that really matches with their institution.
My name is Betty Young, and I am president of Hocking College, which is located in southeastern Ohio. Some of you know, somebody's waving back there, good deal. Some of you are from Ohio University here today. We're about 15 miles up the road from Ohio University, so those of you know where that is. The one word I would use to describe my authentic leadership is entrepreneurial and creative. And the way that's played out is 5 years ago when I came to Hocking in October of 14. The college was at a $4.4 million deficit 4 months into the budget year on a $35 million budget. That's about 12% in case you did the math real quick in your head. So it was a crisis situation, had declining enrollment of about 50% over 5 prior years. And we have the only two-year college in Ohio with dorms, and they were less than half full. So it was a financial mess. And as you'll hear probably from this panel, often women get those opportunities to clean up things. So being entrepreneurial probably has served me pretty well.
Good morning. My name is Denise McCory. I'm the interim president at the Metropolitan Campus of Cuyahoga Community College. That's in Cleveland. Right there. I think that the value that most aligns with me is integrity, and it's actually built into our values, our spouse values for the institution. And to me, integrity means doing what you say you're going to do and being consistent. And having been at the institution for almost 19 years and being in a variety of different roles, including coming into the institution as an administrative assistant, being consistent is important, and it's hard to fake at that point because you've exposed yourself to a lot of people in a lot of different environments. So I take pride in, and I hope my colleagues will back me up here, that I am consistent in every circle, in every setting, in every role that I've been in. So having that integrity, being reliable, and doing what you say you'll do. And when people know you, they know this is what Denise would do, this is what Denise wouldn't do, this is what Denise believes in. It's important to me.
That's right, you got it.
But Denise, did you bring your own shoes?
That's right.
I'm Cynthia Jackson Hammond, President and CEO of Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio. And I brought my own shoes. And I am in my 8th and final year as President of Central State University, and the emphasis is on final. But it's been a really wonderful experience being the leader of Central State University. I'm not from Ohio, so it was a learning curve for me to come in and find out about the wonderful institutions in Ohio, but the best institution in Wilberforce, Ohio, Central State University. My true value in being my authentic self as a leader is to be focused and steadfast. And it's sort of coupled with what Denise said. When you are in a presidential or any leadership role, you have to remain focused on what the objectives to be accomplished part. There will be a lot of noise in your ear from every aspect of the world, not just of your community, but from parents, from alums who think that the institution should run the way it was back in 1950s, to students who think they know but really don't know, to public media who always have an inquiring mind. So all of this is going to be part of the space that you are in as a leader, but you must remain focused and steadfast on what the given objectives or the vision is for your institution.
I'm here for the cheering section during my college. I will tell you, this is a delight to be here with you this morning. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity just to share my experiences with the hopes that you all will be very, very successful. I am the 7th president of Wright State University. I am the first woman. And I also was the chancellor of Missouri University of Science and Technology. And so I've been in the leadership role, the top leadership role at 2 institutions now for about 8 years. And I'm inspired by Cynthia and feeling very good about coming to Wright State and turning the university around. We're now in very sound financial, sustainable financial footing, accomplished in a very short amount of time. And just to let everybody know again, for FY19, closing out the books, we have a $14 million surplus. That follows a $10 million surplus the year before, and when I came in, I inherited 6 years of deficit spending and a spend down of $130 million of reserves. I will let you all know that we have about 27 days that our reserves were covered when I came in, and now we're up at about the 3-month mark, which is where we should be. So I feel very good about that. We've taken behind us and had to make some very difficult decisions. It's kind of a cleanup mode, as I think many of us are used to. We have we're able to resolve a faculty contract and through 2023, which is quite amazing. And we put a lot of other things behind us. So I feel very good about the momentum that we're building and where we're going as an institution. And so I think this is a time for me to take a little bit of a break. I've been in administration for over 2 decades, 8 years again at the top. I had the opportunity to not only be chancellor and president, but also associate vice president for research and dean of engineering. So have had some wonderful experiences as well. On a personal note, my husband and I have 2 single children. They're bookend children, I describe them. We have a daughter who's in middle school. And anybody out there who can relate to that, I'm feeling good about having the opportunity to spend a little more time with her. In addition, our son and his family are moving to Dayton in December, along with our newly born grandson, who's 5 months old. And so I'm just really relishing my new role and the opportunity then to return to faculty. So it's been very, very exciting and rewarding to lead Wright State. Go Raiders! And I see a number of great faces here, and I know that we will continue to move forward.
Are there aspects of your authentic self that you find challenging in your role as a president and a leader? And while you're thinking of that, I'll share the challenge that I always have is I think I have an awesome sense of humor. Not others always think that my sense of humor is all that awesome. And so it's something that I've had to learn to maybe think twice about what I think is funny or a pithy comment.
and I've learned to keep those to myself fairly often. But I do think my sense of humor also helps me get through a lot of things and not take myself too terribly seriously. So who would like to start with that?
My authentic self includes being extremely detail-oriented and very transparent. And that does not always become congruent with people who may see the big picture but not see the small areas that need to be addressed. Transparency is important in this role. And the idea of being transparent and the comfortability of being transparent is a result of knowing every possible detail of an issue or a situation before you make a decision. And we were talking a little bit about female leadership and that we tend to be more detailed than our male counterparts. I indicated that my husband was in leadership position for a long time in his field, and I said to him, you know, you have a whole lot of women around you that make you look good. And he did, and he had to put something. He says, no, I say, no, you made the decision because somebody else did all of the work to help you to make that decision. So he sort of had to acknowledge that. But it is important that you are transparent in your role and that you look at every aspect of every situation possible before a final decision is made. And that means that other people around you have to do that kind of work and that kind of thoughtful cogitation about, if I do this, what would happen? How would this impact this group? What would be the ramifications of this group? So transparency and being detail-oriented doesn't always set with the greater majority, but it is my authentic self.
So I failed in my introduction to talk about what's important that I hold personally, and that is creativity and innovation. And that is something that is in great demand for any leadership position and any role that you have in higher education, frankly. But I would go back to agreeing that integrity is really central to what I do and how I do it. And so I do what I say. I walk the talk. I'm transparent and open, people know what the issue is, and I think that is really very, very important in building up trust and confidence, particularly if you have an institution that's been kind of through a rough patch. But that transparency and that integrity really helps get that team back in play. I would say that one thing that's really challenging with the role of the president is dealing with emotions, right? And I think it's a particular challenge for women, right? That there's an assumption of emotions, and if you are emotive, that can be viewed as a weakness as opposed to a strength in our male counterparts. So it's something that I think we'd like to be able to think about. Sometimes people need to vent, right? and how you work with that and help them move through that process, I think is very important.
My authentic self is introverted extrovert. Has anybody heard of that? So, in a president's role or any leadership role, you're responsible for setting the tone, the ethos, the culture of the unit you lead or the campus that you lead. And that requires a lot of you. These roles take a lot more than they give, to be quite honest. It really requires a spirit of servant leadership. You're constantly pouring into people, cheering people on, showing compassion, patting people on the back, kind of taking on people's emotional issues sometimes, all for the greater good of the mission at hand. And, for me, as someone who's an introvert and extrovert, that requires a lot of energy. So yes, in settings like this, I really enjoy networking. I really enjoy getting to know people. Excuse me, I'm comfortable in front of audiences, but in a couple of hours, I'm going to want to crawl under the covers and watch Grey's Anatomy. And that's hard to balance because you give so much of yourself throughout the day and through these roles, and then trying to reserve something when you get home. And your kids want to talk about their day, and your spouse wants to talk about his day. So it requires a lot of you and trying to find a balance and some time to yourself so that you can recharge and do the best you can for this role.
All right, well, here goes. I am a bit of a scrapper. I'm up for a good fight. And the thing is, I'm the mother bear. I fight for my family. I fight for my kids at school. I'm kind of out there for my institution. I'm going to fight for them. And I'd like to fight for myself, okay? But in these positions, it's not our role to fight for our own defense. It is about our institutions. It's about our kids. It's about our communities. And it's not about us. So I've been a president of 4 different places. Some have been more successful than others. Some I've stayed longer than others. But at 4 different places. So when I went to this institution, it was in crisis. And the board said, well, tell us a little bit about these couple of places you've been, and you didn't stay very long, and this kind of thing happened. Tell us a little bit about that. And I said, well, what do you know? And so they told me what they'd read in the paper. And I said, so what did you read about my response? Well, we didn't really read his response. I said, well, I want you to remember that. Now, at this institution I was coming to, the president had been very much in the paper degrading the board. Don't do that. I don't care what you're doing in your career, just don't do that, okay? And I said, well, that's not going to happen. I think that's when they made the decision of who they were going to put in the interim presidency. You're always going to have curmudgeons, naysayers, people, they're gnats. To me, they're like gnats, okay? I don't have time or energy. But here's the other thing, I'm going to tell them they're gnats. The authentic me is going to show up and is going to be willing to be authentic with you. No matter if you're the person who is on my team or the person who's trying to be a cancer in my organization. I'm going to speak that truth to you every time. So I had a lady come to me one day and she's like, okay, I'd like to move up in the organization. What do you think? Can you help me? I said, we can talk. So I said, would you be surprised to learn that people don't think you meet your classes on a regular basis? Would you be surprised to learn if somebody said, and I went on through this list of things that I knew people said about her on campus. And she said, well, I didn't really come here for that. And I said, well, you didn't really come for my advice. And I'm sorry, because I think you have great potential. Great potential. And I think, you're blowing the potential you have. And so she didn't stay with my organization, which is okay. But she's never going to reach her full potential because she's not willing to look in the mirror. She's not willing to have that best friend who will tell you, don't do that. So be that friend to people. Too often in the women's groups that we are not our own best friends. Be our own best friends. Be authentic, show up, be willing to be honest with people, not cruel. I can be honest with you and go have cocktails with you. Okay? That's how it ought to work. That's how it ought to work.
So that sort of leads to the next question. Have you ever, as you work with others around you and you've encouraged or discouraged them, have you ever had to talk to someone about what was preventing them from being promoted or advancing in the institution? And what advice did you give them?
I think that comes with the territory of being a leader. And part of that is being as transparent from the beginning all the way to the end. Oftentimes, people will come when they think that they are ready to move to the next level instead of seeking the mentorship that they need to get to the next level. So in my experience, I have mentored a lot of women, but I've only mentored those who were willing to be mentored. Those, like the ones that Dr. Young mentioned, I tell them up front, I'm ready. You go get ready, and then we will have a conversation. And I think that saying that up front, I don't go into a lot of details. I just simply say, be sure that you are ready to hear the advice that you are asking for. If you're not ready to hear it, then I'm not the person to mentor you.
I mentioned I was a dean of engineering. Just for your information, only about 3% of department chairs in engineering nationally are women. It makes it a real challenge to move up in the organization because in administrative leadership, just simply because that's the normal pathway, is through the department chair. So I had the opportunity to mentor a number of women as Dean of Engineering, and we ended up being, by the way, 40% of the leadership in the college was women, and that was a tremendous movement forward. I would say, though, that I had several women who were just top-notch, who were associate professors, and who were feeling that they needed to save their department and go on in a new department chair. And I counseled all of them that what they really needed to do, in my opinion, was be that full professor, and then they could contribute. I will tell you that they all decided to accept that advice. I helped them with providing some meaningful experiences so that they would have a great shot as they moved into leadership after they became full professor. I had the opportunity to send them to a lot of professional development. And so I feel really good to tell you that every one of them is now a dean.
And one last question here is, have you noticed patterns in, especially those women that have advanced and those that have not? I think you might have addressed that, but if you have any last comments on that for our participants.
I have noticed patterns, and this was mentioned this morning in the HERS presentation. Emotional intelligence is key, I think, to advancement. Women who are coachable, women who have a spirit of giving, and just I know I didn't answer this in the last, but this is coming to me now, that there have been women who have come to me for mentoring advice, and I have talked them out of certain moves for a lot of different reasons, but the main one I ask is, why are you interested in this? And if it's about a kind of a chess move where you want to be in a certain amount of time or what you're looking to get out of it, like I said, these positions, these opportunities, these blessings, we'll call it blessings, they take more than they give. So you have to be in a spirit of service and in advancing the mission of whatever you're trying to do. So when it doesn't come back in that spirit, I help people re-examine why they want the position, because you don't want to put people in a situation where they won't be successful or they won't love what you do. You have to love this work. You have to love the students and the reason why you're doing the work. So it's really important that I help whoever I'm talking with examine the why behind why they're making a move.
So what I've noticed about people who move up is that they're all in. And they kind of put the fear to the side and are willing to do things that are not in their lane. They're also willing not just to stay in the lane, but to press the status quo. and to venture out into other areas. They always step up and are willing to try and take on new responsibilities, work in other areas that maybe aren't theirs direct. One of my early experiences, I was a faculty member, started as an adjunct, became a full-time, went through those ranks. But I got involved with student services at the first college I worked at. Just because I loved kids. I just loved the students. So, I had the business lunch club, and I started that with them. But I arranged a ski trip. I went to the president, and I said, our kids don't know how to do anything. They've never been anywhere. Some of them have never been, more than 40 miles from home here, okay? So I want to take them down into West Virginia, 3 hours away. I want to take them skiing. And I said, will you support it a little bit? Can you help us? And he said, I'll get you one bus. When we left with 7 buses, full. And with community members like judges and people like that on each of the buses with the students. It was amazing. And we did many more things like that with student services while I was there. Now, I didn't work in student services. I've never worked directly in student services. But I wanted to do something for my kids, and this seemed like a cool thing. So I learned a lot from the people in student services in those kinds of things. But being willing to say, hey, I'd like to do this, I'd like to try it, could you let us try? I think that's really, really important. And just this idea of showing up and being all in. Staying late if it requires it, coming in early if it requires it, being there on Saturday, all those extras. If you're really not ready for those extras, it's okay to say, I'm not going to make those steps. It's okay to be in the position you're in. And it might be all life situational at the time. I had my daughter when I was 20. I didn't go to college till I was 28. Okay? I have an associate degree, a bachelor's, master's, PhD, and a law degree, and a postdoctorate in business law. Now, once I started, I didn't quit. Okay? But there was a period of time when I couldn't be doing some of the things that I can do today, because my daughter today is 40-some years old, even though I'm still very young, because I had her when I was very young, right? So it's all situational, but I think we have to be willing to be honest with ourselves. And where are we in our life's journey and our venture? And then go for it.
To sort of echo what you've heard so far, you do have to be a risk taker.
Yes.
You have to do things that people said they wanted to do, but just a little bit too timid. If you want to be seen as a person who's innovative, creative, and all in. Now, that was my life as well at the beginning. But then I realized that somehow in this very, very male-dominated profession, people began to sort of take a little advantage of that. I became wiser, and I realized that as a leader, you don't have to be a martyr. You lead, and leadership is inspiring others to your vision. You don't have to take on every role, but at the beginning, you are growing in those experiences as well. There may be experiences that you give to the community, experiences you give to students, experiences you give to your colleagues, but at some point, you have to move from that understanding of self to something that says, how do I get others to be a part of this journey? And I think that's where we are as women leaders now, that we look around us and say, who's going to take on this task or this journey of leadership? And that's why you were here today, because we want to make sure that what we have put forth in our own space will continue, and you have those wonderful, wonderful experiences as a new leader, a mid-leader, and a seasoned leader.
So I would like to add to the risk-taking by seeing how many people know of Colin Powell's 40-70 rule. That is, if you have 40 to 70% of the information you need to make a decision, make a decision. And if you're wrong, admit it, learn from it, go on. But delay can be worse than making a wrong decision. So right there, I did want to add that. I was very interested in this question because it makes you think about what patterns you see with those people who are successful. One thing is that they have mentors. And if you don't have mentors, go find some. I went to a woman provost who was a scientist and said, would you be my mentor? She was surprised, but she provided opportunities and sponsorships in ways that really moved forward. So I wouldn't be a president, I wouldn't be a faculty member, I wouldn't be an engineer if I hadn't had mentors. The other thing is that those successful people have extensive networks, and women aren't necessarily as good or have those automatic networks. You be very purposeful about it. The fact that you're here makes me think that you understand that part. The other thing that I noticed is that successful people listen first, and they give credit to others. And then finally, I think this is very important, particularly for higher education. Higher education is changing rapidly. And those people who are successful understand the landscape. They know what the environment is. They know that the attributes of leaders these days are not what the attributes of leaders used to be. And so Wayne Gretzky skate to where the puck will be, not where the puck is.
I'm Bernadette Fitzsimmons, president of FIRST. Glad to have you all here. Two of you have already stated that when you started your position, your institution was in a very challenging position. I didn't get the backstory. 3 out of 4. Okay. Why is it they wanted a woman to come in after that? It just seems like there's a lot of women that are taking on these challenging positions. The institution is in a difficult position. What I've also noticed, and no research to back this up, this observation, is that once the woman takes care of that, they bring in a man to maintain it. I'd like you to just speak to that a little bit.
I always tell my staff and my reports, choose your words carefully. So right now I'm choosing my words carefully. Yes, but there's a camera back there. I think sometimes institutions get into a position of denial about what is really happening in the institution. And that sort of speaks to what Cheryl mentioned about how rapidly the paradigm of higher ed changes. And during that time of denial, the shift was happening, but not always are board members aware of the shifts. They should be, but they are not always aware. I'm an avid reader. I read everything. And I find myself, and I've had 2 boards, 2 completely separate boards. During my period, I realized that in order for the institution to move forward, I have to educate my board. So I'm constantly sending them literature. Did you see this article? How does this relate? So it is a relationship. And it is through that relationship with both of my boards and educating them, because they are not from higher ed. Your boards are not always from higher ed. They just went to college. They didn't administer. They were not administrators. They were not faculty. They just attended. So they see things from corporate lands and not necessarily from higher ed lands. So you have to educate people to allow them to come along with the change that has to happen. And sometimes that change has to happen very, very quickly. I think that the presidents on this panel have made significant, unbelievable changes for the better of their institutions. It doesn't have anything to do necessarily with what happened before, because we never look back. We just keep looking forward. Women look forward. And so when we make changes that are in the best interest of the university, it lays the foundation for growth. Now, what happens after we leave is questionable. That's why it's so important that if you are available to be women on a board, that you bring the women's female intuitiveness, smart, integrity, all of those things, because we typically are not nostalgic unless it's about our kids' pictures. But we are looking, what's next? How do we make this better? Did this work? We are assessors, we evaluate. This was good, but was it great? Nope, then let's move to greatness. So I think that that's just part of our DNA, to always, I mean, we do it every day. Oh, my hair doesn't look quite right. What color can I put in? What curler can I put in? What is it that we're going to do to make the world better and our space better? Men, they're men. That's all.
I'd just like to add, in case people haven't heard the news, that the provost, Sue Edwards, will be the next president of Wright State University. And I am tremendously pleased about that. I had the question posed to me that Irma just posed earlier, and it was exactly that, is usually when you have one person in a position, the next person becomes the exact opposite. And so I feel very good, and I hope that people understand that I think is a hurdle that we overcame, and I think that she'll do a great job.
I had the opportunity, actually, when I was seeking my presidency as the state, or actually looking for a second presidency, to choose a college that I knew was in superb shape. So usually, and I think sometimes women do get into institutions that are having issues. No institution is perfect. But again, we are in the minority and looking for opportunities, so we take an opportunity where there is a challenge. I think probably every president on this board has experienced when you go into the job, they are never honest with you about what it is you're getting into. So always keep that in mind, whatever is being presented to you. There's certainly an undertone there, but I did have, my first presidency was in a small college in West Virginia, but then after that I was able to really pick and choose, and but I did resonate with Betty's all in, because when the opportunity came up at Edison State, I mean, I was all in. I threw every egg in that basket and just went after it with tenacity, knowing that that was such a great opportunity, and it absolutely has been a wonderful opportunity.
Hi, I'm Christine O'Malley from Ohio State University, the Ohio State University. I work in the Office of Human Resources. And Dr. Jackson Hammond and Dr. Schrader, you both mentioned transparency and integrity in decision making. And I was wondering if you could give examples of transparent decision making in a time of intense change, and it sounds like both of you have had that experience, and particularly when those decisions that are being made don't make everyone happy. And then I also wondered, does that transparent leadership look, or is it perceived differently coming from a woman leader versus a man leader?
Yes.
So, I had 3 goals coming into my first year at Wright State University, and that was financial sustainability, administrative transparency, and campus conversation. And so I think in terms of the administrative transparency, we have been able to put in place a lot of policies and practices that just were lacking. The university had grown up, it continued to operate built on relationships as opposed to, a more formalized structure. In particular, with regard to budget and other burning issues, I've started a series of Let's Talk forums, just to grapple with, here's a big issue, budget, right, and a number of other topics. I also instituted invitations to leaders around the university to come and talk to the leadership team on a regular basis, student government, faculty senate, staff council, and so on. I go to lunch with folks. I think that one of the things that's most important when you think about building that trust and being open and honest is having conversations that don't have an agenda behind them. So being able to, for example, when I started, and I started in the summer, and I wanted to get to know folks, and I met with every single department chair because they were there in the summer. In their space, so they could show me what I needed to see and tell me about their hopes and their dreams and their concerns. So I would just encourage that along with the structure, we also changed a lot of the organizational structure, and in particular with the budget. This last year, it was, I believe, the first time that the budget actually came from the bottom up. So it started with conversations, and I see heads nodding, conversations with the individual units saying, this is what we can do to move the university forward. So that's helpful.
It's interesting that we both did the same thing, and we are only 20 miles away from each other. We, at Central State, I came in having town hall meetings for the first year. Every month, we were having a town hall meeting. Didn't matter what the topic was, there was no topic. People just shared what they wanted to share. And then the subsequent years, we had sessions called Listen, Chat, Listen. And those were intentionally set up to address certain issues that just may have been ignored, that bubbled up to something that we could not ignore. So having forums of that nature that allows students, community people, faculty, staff, administrators to have their say was important to building transparency and trust between what was being proposed and the decisions that had to be made. On the other note about pleasing everyone, that's not my job. Never was, never will be. That's not my job. As president of a university, your job is in the best interest of the university, not of individual people. And I made that very, very clear. People make suggestions, judges have to make decisions. And that's a big difference. And so if they know that up front, then you really don't owe anyone any personal considerations if it does not enmesh what the university needs to go to. The second thing that I would say helped us tremendously in our next phase is the development of the university's strategic plan. We did that with my first year. It was a 6-year, my second year, it was a 6-year plan. The strategic plan was developed by faculty, staff, students, community, and administrators. Forever, until we got to the understanding that we will focus and operate on 6 compelling priorities. And those 6 compelling priorities, that's what drives us. It's not something we wrote and put on the shelf. Those were our guiding principles. Our budget was aligned to those priorities. So you may have a great idea, but if it does not complement or support the compelling priorities, it would not be done. And that's what I meant by being transparent with the understanding and management by objective. When you manage by the established goals that are set forth, and everyone knows the goal, success is usually the result. And we are very, very much in a much better place with our Senate Bill ratio, and we too have surplus. And now everybody can receive the benefits of being good participants in the strategic plan.
I just want to add to that, with regard to the strategic plan. We brought in thousands of faculty, staff, students, community leaders, alumni, in 2018 to really move through a process to determine how we're going to move forward. And it's the process that's really most important, because that did allow us to have those campus conversations that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And people began to see how they personally could be engaged and be successful and so on. And aligning the budget with those priorities is very, very important. But I want to go back to the values, since we're talking about leadership. It's the shared values of the university that should drive everything. And so I think that's really important to go through a process where everybody comes in and says, yes, these are the values.
Super fast.
Hi, I'm Brianna Buckner from the University of Cincinnati Blue Ash College. The question we have is, so Dr. Cynthia Jackson-Hammond, you had mentioned that you like to read, and so we're going to pose the question to the whole board, but also kind of pick your brain about if you would recommend a book that has helped you in your career throughout your advancement in your position, what would it be?
Know Your Value is one that is by, I can't recall her name. She is on the, she's married to Morning Joe. Her name is Mika. Yes, I think that's one that, a contemporary one that you might need to read. And then there are some fictional books, believe it or not, that gives you a lot of introspectiveness, gave me a lot of introspectiveness about who I was as a person and my growth as a leader. And I think Maya Angelou's books have always been very, very introspective. They may take a sordid turn, but it helps you to be reflective. I know about the cage bird thing. That was one that I read over and over again. Sula. And all these have an Afrocentric background, but it's about women. It's about the growth of women. And so although it may be Afrocentric in the characters, the value of knowing your worth and knowing your history and knowing how you have evolved as a person gives a lot of credibility to who you might be as a leader.
I would go back to a book that was very helpful for me early on in my career, and that is Talking from 9 to 5. Deborah Tan. And it was very helpful for me because I had the opportunity in professional technical organizations to work with people around the globe and to understand that people have a different way of communicating. And that helped me understand how I was communicating, how women may communicate different than our male counterparts, and how that communication is received. So I learned a lot of things, not just about the communication, but the interpersonal communication. So I think it's very important, and it helps you relate to other people in different ways to understand why you're in different areas of the country or Ohio. Right? You may not be doing things in a way that's very well received.
There's a book that I'm not in my first 90 days, I'm the other 90 days in this role, but I've been in a lot of different roles, and this information that's often I've reread it every time I started a new role, and it's called The First 90 Days. And there's some really practical tips in there for how to get yourself acclimated to a new role, and I use it to help others as I coach new team members on how to get acclimated. So when they're encountering anything new as far as a goal or any endeavor, here's very practical steps to how you get through that. A couple of personal things that I love. There's a book called Pain River, and it's master-centric. I love that book. I've read that many times. That gives me a lot of hope and inspiration and strength. And there's another one I'm reading right now, where the crawdad sings. I really love that book. It gives you an opportunity to be introspective and reflect. It's about power and strength. It's balancing the professional pieces and the pieces that allow you to know yourself better and give you strength, support.
So the book for me is a book called Leadership on the Line. It's an easy read, but it's very practical oriented. But it's really a speech that really, that I always recommend to people. And it's Teddy Roosevelt's speech. It's not the critic. It's the man who's in the arena with blood, sweat, and tears on his face that makes a difference. That's the beginning of it, some paraphrase. But that really is an inspirational piece to me. So I'd like to close with saying to all of you, come and see my book collection. It's on my wall. And see all of the kind of great things that I read. I am an avid reader as well. I think it's one of those patterns we see in very successful people. I invite any of you at any time. I remember the day I called Val Moeller, president of Columbus State, and here I was just this really lonely dean down the street, and I said, would you consider speaking to me? I'd really like to look at the pathway to the presidency. And she took time out of her busy schedule, a very busy person, to take an hour with me to say, these are the things to think about. We're all willing to do that, I know that, and reach out and know that there are women who are very happy to help you find your way.
Thank you so much. The presidents here, I know they are not going to have lunch up at this table. They've got their table service, so please seek them out throughout the lunch, throughout the day, or afterwards. I know each and every one of them will respond to an email request for you. I know that. I know them very well. Don't hesitate to do that. It's all about networking, but these are women, as you see, that have a tremendous amount to offer, and they'd be willing to help you with any question, any networking that you want to do. No question is too big or too small. So please seek them out throughout the conference and even afterwards. And with that, then I guess you'll organize lunch. Yes, I am.
So can we